After Thanos rips the Mind Stone from Vision and dies, the Scarlet Witch is consumed by madness and creates an alternate universe where everything is apparently fine. That's why today on the Summarizer, WandaVision. It all begins in 1950 with Wanda and Vision arriving to their new reality as newlyweds. Wanda is a housewife with powers, while Vision is an office worker who has to work to support the wife. Right before Vision goes to work, he looks at the calendar and notices that a heart is above 23, although neither of them can remember why. Then we meet Agnes. She is the neighbor who comes to visit Wanda and asks her questions about her life, where she comes from, how many years she has been married, complicated questions for Wanda. Agnes starts questioning her on what the special occasion could be, and Wanda tells her that it's an anniversary. On the other hand, Vision is at work where he is doing very well. He is worried because his wife told him that today was an important date, but he doesn't know what about. At that moment, Mr. Hart arrives. His boss reminds him that he's coming to dinner at his house today, so he thinks that's the important date. Vision calls up Wanda to tell her that night, but Wanda is still convinced it's an anniversary, and when he calls, she says, "Don't worry dear, I have everything under control." The night comes and Wanda waits for Vision, so she covers his eyes, but she mistakes him for his boss.
It is that this is the traditional Sokovian greeting of hospitality.
Mr. Hart was very hungry, so Agnes arrives with things for Wanda to cook something. The boss was tired, he was hungry and started yelling at her, but while that was happening, Wanda was serving him dinner. The boss started to ask some uncomfortable questions until he started to choke. Vision saves him and they leave, but before leaving, he tells him that his promotion is very likely. Then Wanda and Vision talk about their anniversary, and that they never had one, so they decide to do it, and Wanda makes the rings appear. Later, Wanda and Vision are sleeping in separate beds when they're awoken in the middle of the night by a noise, though they realize it's nothing more than just a tree branch banging against their window. The next day, Vision is practicing for the magic performance they have to do in front of the whole neighborhood. Both say goodbye. Wanda will go to plan the whole event, while Vision will go to see the security thing of the neighborhood, and they will meet on stage. When Wanda is leaving, she finds a strange red helicopter with yellow propeller tips. So far, this is the only thing that has color in the entire series. At that moment, her neighbor shows up, lends her rabbit for the magic presentation, and tells Wanda that the head of the neighborhood is Dottie. On the other hand, Vision arrives at the neighborhood safety board, but he unintentionally swallows a piece of gum, and we see how it interferes with the functioning of his gears. Returning to Wanda, we see that Dottie chose her to stay behind to clean everything up and tells her that she heard some rumors about her and her husband. She starts asking her several questions, and on the radio they were listening to music. A voice starts to be heard calling Wanda.
Wanda. Who's doing this to you, Wanda?
But Wanda blows it up. Later in the presentation, Vision arrives as if he was drunk, but it's their turn to go on stage. The presentation looks like a mess, but Wanda ends up fixing it, and they recognize it as the best show of the presentation. Then they both arrive home, and magically Wanda appears pregnant. But they hear the weird noise again. They go outside and both see a guy coming out of the sewer, so she says no. And they go back in time and back to the moment when they kiss. But this time, instead of hearing the noise, everything turns colorful, although the question remains.
Who's doing this to you, Wanda?
After finding out she was pregnant, we continue in the 70s with a doctor checking Wanda. As usual, we have some bugged characters doing nonsense, but the most important thing is that Wanda and Vision are getting ready to have their baby. But also, something that surprises us quite a bit is that Wanda quickly starts to grow her belly until her water breaks. Vision went to bring the doctor to see Wanda, and she greets a visit from Geraldine, one of the neighbors from the previous episode. She tells her that everything in her house collapsed, and now she asks for a bucket. Wanda is about to give birth, so this woman helps her, and that's how Wanda's first child, Tommy, is born. But it's not long before she has new birth contractions, having the second twin named Billy. Then Vision goes out with the doctor, and it gets a little strange. We see Agnes next to one of the neighbors, cutting through what appears to be the wall that divides the houses. But things get even stranger, because they tell him that Geraldine, the woman inside with Wanda, is a strange woman who has no home, and we assume that she is a spy. While Wanda is inside with Geraldine, she tells her about her brother Pietro, but Geraldine tells her that he was killed by Ultron. Then Wanda notices the symbol Geraldine has, gets nervous and says, "Who are you?" Vision enters the house and Wanda tells him that Geraldine is already gone. But things get even more interesting here because we see how the shot changes from a square to a panoramic, making us reference that this is reality, where we see the Westview sign and out of nowhere Geraldine is sent away through some sort of portal. There we discover that this woman seems to be allied with some organization, and that they want to control everything that happens in this reality that Wanda created in Westview. Now we are shown Monica Rambeau reappearing after the snap, which makes us think that she had disappeared along with 50% of the population. We learn that Monica was looking for her mother, but is told that she passed away 3 years ago. Later we are introduced to the S.W.O.R.D organization, a human weapons observation and response division. Inside this building we see Monica arrive at work and meet the director of the organization. The director tells her that the FBI has a very important case about missing persons, and they requested some drones from this organization, so he assigns her the mission. In New Jersey, we meet James Wu, another FBI agent. It is here that we meet the town of Westview. Monica takes a drone out of the car and sends it to Westview, and just as it crosses the perimeter of the town, it loses signal. So Monica wants to see what's there, places her hand, and this thing swallows her. Later, S.W.O.R.D hires these super brains, who will figure out what's going on. So they all set up a S.W.O.R.D response base outside of Westview. In this part, we will follow Dr. Darcy Lewis. She, with her devices, begins to detect a signal and connect an old TV. She manages to pick up a signal and is watching everything we have seen in the previous 3 episodes. Apparently, Wanda has created a sitcom, but the most important mission was to rescue Monica. So while Wanda is with Monica, or Geraldine, inside the show, she gets the message we all listened to in the previous episodes.
Wanda, can you read me? Over.
S.W.O.R.D was also planning an infiltration through the subterranean tunnels in which they send a guy in a suit to infiltrate through the sewers. But when he goes through the force field, his suit transforms into the Beekeepers. The emergency cable is cut, and then he makes it all the way to Westview in the scene we all watched at the end of episode 2. Later, as they continue to watch the transmission, it cuts out, and we see what really happened between Wanda and Monica. Wanda tells her that she is no longer her neighbor and not to invade her place, and with her powers, sends her far away. Continuing in Westview, Wanda and Vision are happy with their twins. Minutes later, Agnes arrives, and out of nowhere, the twins are already 4 or 5 years old. Then the series transports us to what happened with Monica, who has memories of Wanda in her head. Meanwhile, the S.W.O.R.D agents are convinced that Wanda is the villain, while Monica defends her, saying she is not a terrorist. But this S.W.O.R.D guy tells us that 9 days ago, Wanda invaded the top secret location where the Vision corpse was. Meanwhile, the twins, Tommy and Billy, continue to play with a puppy, and magically now they are 10 years old. Meanwhile, Vision is at work, and they get an email from S.W.O.R.D. He is shocked by what just happened and touches the head of his coworker with his powers, who wakes up from this reality that Wanda created. He tells Vision to make Wanda stop because she is controlling everything he thinks, but Vision touches his head again and returns to normal. A S.W.O.R.D-controlled drone appears in Wanda's house, and another guy orders them to fire. Out of nowhere, the perimeter of Westview starts to have an anomaly. Everyone leaves and Wanda appears with S.W.O.R.D's missile, tells them not to disturb her, and returns inside.
Stay out of my home. You don't bother me, I won't bother you.
In Wanda's reality, we see how she and the children are looking for their dog, even though Agnes tells them it is dead. Vision seems to have figured it all out by now and asks Wanda questions. He gets upset and they have a confrontation. But just then they hear the doorbell ring and Pietro, her brother, appears. We are now set in Halloween. Vision in his iconic costume tells Wanda that he's going to leave the house for a walk. Meanwhile, Pietro and Billy dress up as Logan. Outside, all the S.W.O.R.D people are freaking out after launching the missile at Wanda. This guy says to assassinate her, but Monica tells him not to do it, and the 3 agents turn on Hayward, but he says to get them out of his base. Returning to the town, Wanda realizes that Vision lied to her, and was in the surroundings where he sees that many things do not make sense, as this lady who is apparently bugged. Meanwhile, the 3 S.W.O.R.D agents hack the entire base to access the director's data, and they realize that he was fooling them, since he can see what is going on in Westview. They realize that the people around the town are barely moving, and that Vision is moving and is reaching the limits. Inside, everything becomes disturbing to Vision, who sees a stalled van with Agnes inside. Vision wakes her up, and Agnes recognizes him, tells him he is part of the Avengers and that he is dead. But Vision wants to leave Westview, and crosses the avenue Ellis, reaches an electromagnetic field and begins to cross it. Vision manages to leave but begins to disintegrate. Billy listens to the suffering and tells Wanda what is going on. At that moment, she paralyzes the whole party and uses her powers to expand the electromagnetic field and make Westview bigger. We see how this growing area covers Vision and how almost all the S.W.O.R.D people turn into clowns and the base becomes a giant circus tent, all Halloween themed. Now the series has a reality show format. Agnes arrives at Wanda's house and takes the children for a walk. Meanwhile, Wanda is freaking out because strange things are happening in her house. Outside, Monica is putting on the supersuit that was ordered to enter Westview, but when she goes across the perimeter, crashes the vehicle. Everything is going wrong, but Monica manages to escape. Then we see how this Westview dome turned her armored truck into a van. But Monica doesn't give up, and when everyone goes to save her, she runs to the perimeter and enters. She has multiple hallucinations, and now her eyes are blue. Monica gets to the house, but Wanda doesn't want her help, and uses her powers to lift her up. And when she throws her against the floor, we see Monica resists and emits some kind of blue essence. The two start arguing in the street, but Agnes is watching this and shows up to take Wanda to her house. When they get there, Wanda realizes that something is not right in that house, and asks where her children are. Agnes replies that they are playing in the basement, so Wanda goes to look for them. When she enters, it's a pretty scary basement, and it seems to extend underneath the whole town. And out of nowhere, Agnes appears, and introduces herself as the witch, Agatha Harkness.
The name's Agatha Harkness. Lovely to finally meet you, dear.
She tells her that she's not the only one with super magical powers around here, and she pours a purple essence into Wanda's eyes. Then she shows us how she flew into Westview and became Agnes. And we find out that she's been doing strange things for her personal purposes, paralyzing people, murdering the kid's dog, and we also learn that she's behind the scenes. We are now set in 1693, where strange executioners are taking Agatha away. This woman tells Agatha that she betrayed them, and that the magic she practices is very dark. When they are attacking her, Agatha gets the purple essence that we saw with Wanda, and begins to consume the power of the other witches, until she leaves them old. And after murdering them all, she leaves. In the present, Agatha is still talking to Wanda. She wants to use her magic, but apparently Wanda's magic doesn't work in this place. Agatha also tells her that she is behind Pietro, that she hears and sees everything through him. Agatha wants to know what she did to control so many people in Westview, but Wanda tells her that she doesn't know. Wanda enters a room, and there we see her memories. After her parents were killed and the town she lived in was destroyed, she willingly joined Hydra and touched Loki's scepter that had the Soul Stone in it. Later, we move to the memories after the death of Vision. Wanda wanted him back, and we see her walking into the S.W.O.R.D building in search of Vision's body. This guy shows her Vision's remains, and tells her that she might revive him, but he's not going to give her the body to bury. Wanda, devastated by everything she was seeing, goes down to see Vision's body, but then leaves. Though she doesn't go home, she heads to Westview. She stands in an uninhabited place, reads a letter, and shattered by all this pain, unleashes all her power. We see how she begins to create Westview, and we also see how she manages to create Vision out of nothing, with the same golden essence that we saw at the moment she touched the Mind Gem. In the next scene, Agatha disappears and we hear Wanda's children screaming. Agatha wants to kill the children. Finally, we see Hayward, who is about to launch something. We see that he reassembled the Vision body and now plans to put it into Westview to bring it to life. Finally, Wanda is ready to face Agatha because now she can use her magic. But when she launches her attacks, it turns out that Agatha can absorb her magic and turn it into part of her. While the children are escaping, White Vision appears. He attacks Wanda without thinking twice, causing her great pain in her head. Luckily, the other Vision appears to help her. At the same time that all this happens, we see how Monica is trapped with the fake Pietro inside Agatha's house. Meanwhile, the fight between the two Visions occurs, exchanging words while they are fighting all over the place. Outside, we see how Hayward is ready to continue attacking in Wanda's reality no matter what anyone else says. Back to the battle, we see how Wanda walks to the center of the city where many people are watching. At this moment, Agatha releases the mind of Dottie, which begins to claim her why she is doing all this with them. Meanwhile, Monica on her side manages to free herself from the fake Pietro and goes to the center where Wanda is. Realizing what she has done, Wanda tries to destroy the reality she has created, and starts to disintegrate everything little by little. But she realizes that this also affects Vision and her two children, so she stops doing it. By this time, Hayward's troops have already managed to enter and are ready to attack the family. While Agatha fights against Wanda, the children are ready to fight against Hayward's troops. Monica appears to save them from the shots produced by Hayward himself, but it seems that the bullets do not have any kind of damage to Monica. Meanwhile, White Vision begins to feel more and more confused of who he is, and gets all the memories of what happened until Infinity War. While on the other hand, Wanda manages to get the villain Agatha into a nightmare. The bad thing is that things turn around and it is Wanda who ends up falling prey to Agatha. When this nightmare is over, we see Wanda very angry, and she tells Agatha that she will give her all her powers. She starts throwing powers at her so Agatha can absorb them, misses a few, and ends up totally exhausted just like the witches we saw earlier. That's when Agatha tries to do the final death blow to Wanda, but she can't. She has no powers. She looks up in the hex and there are a bunch of pulsating symbols. And that's because Wanda was missing Agatha on purpose, repeating back to Agatha the thing that she taught her.
Only the witch that casts the runes can use her magic.
And that's exactly what Wanda was doing, casting runes. The crown starts to appear back on Wanda's head as she tells Agatha, "I don't need you to tell me who I am." And Wanda, as Agatha is screaming no, sucks in all of her powers, becoming in the process the Scarlet Witch. And Agatha says to her, "You don't know what you've done," and they both float down to the ground of Westview. Wanda decides not to end Agatha's life, but rather to leave her in the village. When everything is solved, Wanda, together with Vision and her 2 children, return, put them to bed, and say goodbye because soon their reality will end. Finally, Wanda says goodbye to Vision, since the hex is closing. Wanda meets Monica, who says she doesn't hate her since if she had her powers, she would revive her mother. Wanda mentions that she must learn to control all her magic and then flies off as the Scarlet Witch. An FBI agent comes up to Monica and says they need her in the theater. When she walks in, nobody's there, until the FBI agent turns into a member of the Skrulls, telling Monica it was sent by an old friend of her mother, and someone wants to meet with her at the space. Finally, Wanda is in the middle of nowhere, but as her body is drinking tea, the Scarlet Witch is in the other room reading the Book of the Damned. And then she hears her children yell for her help. So that was season 1 of WandaVision. Comment below what series or movies you want me to summarize next. See you later.
Go to work. Okay. Bye.